Jack Gipple is our next presenter, and he's from the Windhorse Project in Boulder, where he's a supervisor of their teams, some of their teams there. And he's also a director of a homeless shelter or program that he's very involved in. And brings his understanding to the homeless situation and the homeless people in a very similar way as he brings his understanding of madness or altered states, altered conditions, altered lives. So with little further ado, we're going to be finishing around about 6:15. So we'll end whenever you feel like ending, and then we'll have a discussion. So I'd like to welcome Jack.
So just for time, what time is it now?
It is almost 5 o'clock, so we've got about an hour and a quarter.
Okay, if I'm still talking in 30 minutes, why don't you tell me in 30 minutes?
All right, will do.
So I guess I want to, what I'm, as the kind of description of this is to talk about Windhorse. And Windhorse gets talked, I've talked about it a bunch of times. I talked about it last year here. It's often described, I want to say like more externally. And so I'd like to maybe drop in a little bit further, and a lot of my references are, like I'm using jargon that is influenced by working with Tibetan Buddhist practitioners for years, and so some of my jargon or language comes out of that. And I also should say, maybe I'll talk a little bit about my personal things. I feel like I'm not a Buddhist myself. I'm not an ismist. I don't sign up to things very easily. It's just not my nature. So I'm interested in a lot of stuff, but I am reluctant to take on an ism. In Buddhism, they talk about, there's this idea of body, speech, and mind. And I want to talk about, they'll probably keep coming up today as I talk. Because it's a really profound way, it's a really useful way to enter into these topics as far as I'm concerned. So, and I think often Windhorse is described from, you could also say, inner outer secret. So often the outer description is there, and I always wonder if people even know what the kind of substance of our work is. Because there's the inner and then there's kind of the secret levels that are very hard to describe. So I want to just give a quick kind of description of my bio, since we're all giving our kind of maybe our 60s credentials. I came along later. I was born in '59, so I was still a boy in the late 60s, and I grew up in Minnesota, kind of out in the sticks on a lake, kind of a pond lake, and kind of grew up, just the kind of woods boy. And my dad was a chemical engineer, and he was had a PhD in law, and he did patent law for Minnesota Mining, the great mother company of Minnesota. And so he did chemical patents, which meant, of course, he did farming chemicals, things like that. And he and I, for decades, would have debates. I would definitely hold him accountable for his generation, for the things they did in their naivete about things. And he bore up well with that. My mother was she was born in a sod house in North Dakota. Swedes and Norwegians on that side. My grandpa on that side was a constable in some small town during the Depression. By the time I was in late grade school, and my mom had become a social worker and worked at what at the time was kind of a new revolutionary thing, was this assisted living, with graded levels of care for elderly people. My parents were Humphrey Democrats. My mom picked a dentist who was an ardent supporter of Nixon, and I have 3 older sisters, and she would line us all. She would go in, she'd line us all up, and then she was quite the debater, and she would just kind of hold this dentist accountable for all of Nixon's sins while he's working on our mouths. I can feel his fat fingers in my mouth, and nobody wore gloves then, so I can taste his fingers in my mouth when I think of him. So my sisters are all strangely, different kinds of visual artists, and so my dad was, when I was young, I would say like a hyper empiricist, chemist, chemistry. If I said anything, it had to be accounted for. It had to be. You couldn't just make vague comments. He was definitely a scientist. He also. It's interesting because right after kind of the Summer of Love in that period, that just kind of washed across the whole country. It didn't just happen here. It spread out very quickly across the country, and somewhere in that time, I'm not saying it was because of this, but it coincided as my dad slipped into a major depression, couldn't go to work, which was a big deal, and I didn't find this out for years later. It was several months he couldn't go to work, and when he came out of that, he very quickly found Alan Watts, and which was really kind of surprising. And I have, my dad's long dead now, but I have all of his Alan Watts books underlined and footnoted and annotated. And he really, Alan Watts was his North Star after that. When I was probably 12 or 13, I was trying to figure my way out of this, because I was raised with I would think of it as a dead worldview. Like, the world's dead, the earth's a rock. When that we're alive is a miracle of evolution, and when you're dead, so that's it. That's a pretty bleak thing to grow up with, honestly. And then but I'd heard suddenly, when I was like 12 or 13, I heard about this thing, astral projection. And there's this great book, Robert Monroe, Journeys Out of the Body. There's a Monroe Institute in Virginia now, where they've expanded beyond that. But that was a really important book for me, and it set me off on, oh wow, if you can get out of your body, that means we're not just our body. And so that set off a whole chain of things for years. And probably it really led into a lot of I just was a voracious reader of everything related. And of course, the times this was all going on. I think a lot of the books you mentioned, Fritjof, were books I was right in there, Castaneda and the Tao Te Ching and the I Ching, and these were really important books to me. And everything I could get my hands on. The occult, it was called back then, which I guess now they don't really have occult sections. They did back then. But anyway, as a kid, I grew my hair out. My parents said you don't have to cut your hair anymore, and so by 7th grade, I had like blonde hair down to here, which in Minnesota in like 1969, 1970, it's not a good thing. I drew a lot of attack. As a kid, I was, and so I became the kind of outsider. That was what I was. And for really, I just survived for years, knowing that once I got out of this, I was free. And it's funny, when we were talking today, I remember there was there was actually a point I remember people, I had like standing threats that people were gonna jump me and you know, cut my hair off and get that little hippie boy. And so I remember walking once through school and hearing voices shouting at me right behind me, and I spun around and nobody was there. And I thought, oh, I'm starting to hear things. This is not a good thing. And this didn't really evolve. There were a few instances of that, but I knew it actually kind of fueled my fascination with the mind and my mind. And at a really young age, I kind of hit on this various things. I was very interested in depression. I realized how depressed I was, and I realized I had to do something about it. And I really, it became kind of a personal investigation of my own mind. And like, I mean, one thing I would do is intensify it, like go right into okay, I'm feeling depressed. I'm going to get really depressed, and that actually I learned to bottom it out. I could bottom it out sometimes. So anyway, I could go on, but I feel like I'm lucky. I think our bodies matter a lot, so I think I'm very lucky. I think I have a pretty sturdy constitution, and so I think that's helped me. And I think in other situations I would have, it wouldn't have come out so well. Let's see. So I eventually went to college at Boulder for a year. I was too young to go to college at 18, and so I dropped out. And by then, the first wave of the whole '60s thing had passed, and then so we were kind of the next wave. Rainbow festivals and hitchhiked all over and hopped freights and went to Alaska, and hired on a fishing boat and went out the Aleutian Islands, and had, all kinds of those kind of adventures, and also would have periods where I kind of fell into kind of depression. Usually when I was on the road, I was good, but once I stayed in a place, the depression would kind of catch up to me. And it's really, I think it's moving to me to see the orange sunshine. It's beautiful. It's kind of funny, and it's like very. I found myself kind of at tears at times in that, because it was very tragic and moving too, and it brings up a lot of memories for me. There were all kinds of communes, mostly failed ones or failing ones, spread out across the country that I encountered in my travels. And also by then, I don't know, one thing they don't really talk about in that movie was, and I think of them as the predators. The predators, when I was out there, they were all over the place, and they had found, Rainbow Festival. It was pretty. There was a lot of beautiful people doing wonderful, ecstatic things, but there was a lot of predators, and so I was always very careful, and had various run-ins for that. So eventually I went back to grad school. I actually got my undergrad in Missoula, Montana. They have a great creative writing department there. And actually, one of my great professors was Joseph Epps Brown, who was he wrote The Sacred Pipe with Black Elk, and he helped. He had lived with Black Elk, and he would get up and just lecture. He would just speak, and he was in his 70s at this time, at the end of his career. And so, great stories of the Lakota Sioux, and the atrocity on this continent that went down. It seems like we don't talk about that very much, anymore. But man, the atrocities on this continent are just mind blowing. That went down. So this doesn't sound like Windhorse, does it? It led me to back to grad school. I went to a transpersonal school, which later would become part of Naropa. And when I got out, I pretty quickly ended up working with the homeless, and I did a lot of things in those years. I worked with the homeless, and I worked part-time in the Lock Psych unit in Boulder, and I did street outreach to homeless people with schizophrenia, and I wasn't supposed to consort with the alcoholics. I was supposed to look for the schizophrenic people. It's a bizarre, delineation. And then I got married. I have 2 daughters who are now 18 and 20, and when my younger daughter was born, I started working with Windhorse. I met Chuck, and Windhorse at that time was a gathering, but kind of a loose consortium of therapists. It was not yet a business of its own, and we were doing these teams, and it was based on the work, if you know about Windhorse, on the work of Ed Podville. And Ed was, I'll do a little Windhorse bio. So Ed was a contemporary of Laing. Ed was trained in the East at Chestnut Lodge, Otto Wills, Harold Searles. I don't think he ever met Frieda Fromm Reichmann, but her influence was strong on him. And he was classically trained as an analyst, working with people in extreme states of mind. And this is when psychiatric medicine was pretty primitive. There was very low, and so they were really working psychodynamically with people in Chestnut Lodge. And then Ed, I'm just kind of moving quickly through some of this. Is like Ed, came to know Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, and people call him the Vedator. So the Vedator was is the founder of Naropa. He came to Boulder and started that up. And Ed Podville, who later became Lama, so Lama Mingyur was his name later in his life. But Ed and Trungpa and Artie Lang was in these circles too. They were all interested in therapeutic communities, and that's kind of where we we're kind of Kingsley Hall, and they all were trying to figure this out and get kind of onto some of the same ideas. Ed, from everything I know about Laing, is Ed went further into spirituality, and as I said, he became a lama, and he became very deeply practiced, and he spent the end of his life. He was like 12 years in a lifelong retreat in France, and then he became ill and left the retreat, and it turned out he had advanced colon cancer. He came back to Boulder, and I knew him at the very end of his life, and it's interesting because we set up a Windhorse team for Ed as he was dying, and it was a couple of years, I think he was there in Boulder, and he would give teachings and supervision and things, and he would often talk with our clients about how strange it was to have this team come around you and have to take care of these people that were coming to do. We have this thing we call basic attendance, which is, it's very much like what Michael you're describing was totally. That's basic attendance in a nutshell. You show up and be present and work with the moment. So anyway, that's maybe that's enough of that. Ed started to put together these therapeutic households, and initially it was called the Maitri Psychological. It was called Maitri Psychological Services. And Maitri, do you all know the term Maitri? Maitri is a Tibetan Buddhist term, and it's very familiar. It's I think my understanding is it's like compassion. It starts with compassion for yourself and kindness for yourself, and kindness for the kind of even the unforgivable or ugly things of self. And when, you know, often people's interruptions is they aren't doing that. They're quite vicious to themselves. And so Maitri starts with a kindness to yourself. And I always think of it like a glass overflowing. Like if I am hating on myself and attacking myself, then I'm trying to be kind to other people. For me, that feels false. That doesn't quite work. You know, that I can't imagine that I can be kind to other people if I can't be kind to myself. It's a distortion, or it's some kind of form of martyrdom or something to me. So, you know, Maitri, my understanding is it starts with oneself, and then it starts to overflow, and then the kindness can start. It moves out to other people, and then our really great teachers are people who are just emanating. The Maitri is flowing out. So that's why they call it Maitri Psychological Services. So Lungta, I want to say something about Lungta and wind horse. So wind horse, it's a funny term, you know, and it's a direct translation of the Tibetan Buddhist term Lungta. And Lungta years ago had a wind horse housemate who was actually Tibetan, and I was trying to get him to explain to me, like, culturally, what's this, Lungta? Explain it to me from the inside. And he was very literal about it. He said, "Oh, you know the prayer flags, when they blow in the wind, they give off Lungta. They literally give off Lungta," he was saying. Or when you spin a prayer wheel, it generates Lungta. And so Lungta is one of my colleagues, my older colleague, said that Lungta is literally it's wind horse. You know, the word is wind horse, but the meaning it translates as is unconditioned confidence. So often confidence is, and it actually said unconditional, but I've turned it into unconditioned confidence. So it's a human quality, and these are not esoteric. These are things that are familiar to all of us. If you search yourself, like you can be confident because of some condition around you, and that's a kind of confidence. But you can have confidence that's unconditioned. It just comes up, and I think the great lights in really dark places who are still uplifted. It's amazing to me, because when you're in really dark conditions and you still have this unconditioned confidence in Lungta, that's remarkable. That's really remarkable. So there are, I also want to also say is at the heart of wind horse is really is contemplative practice. I have, and I should probably say I've studied Tai Chi since like 1985. I've been a student of Tai Chi. Chenmen Ching he was a teacher that my teachers learned from. My teachers were Jane and Batan Faigao, and they were the main teachers at Naropa. They both have died since. So in wind horse, everybody is encouraged. You can't really require such a thing, but people are strongly encouraged to have some form of contemplative practice. A lot of people have sitting practices. Some people do yoga. Some people do Tai Chi or other arts. Other contemplative arts. I do yoga and Tai Chi and sitting practice at this point, and so let's see. And I'm really trying. This is kind of the inner levels that relates to the teams, but I think it's really important to understand this part of what makes in my case like a wind horse practitioner. Like what is it from the inside out? And it's that you have to find some way to raise your own Lungta repeatedly. You have to, because just life, I mean, forget the work, but just life can bash you down, and if your long-time confidence is all externally conditioned, that can be a problem if you're working in really dark conditions. So I think, I'm sure you guys are all doing it in your own ways. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here, because you just don't survive this work unless you really go after your own lung time. You're raising your confidence. I first heard of the wind. So when I first heard of the Windhorse project, my visual memory is I'm under. If you've been to Boulder, there's a library, and underneath the library there's this plaza that's right by the creek, and that's where we always would do Tai Chi. That was where the classes would gather, and it must have been down there that I heard it for the first time, because whenever I think of that, I'm under there, and I visually I'm under that building. I can see it, and somebody said, "Hey, yeah, there's these Naropa people are doing these therapeutic houses." And they put the client in a house. They rent an apartment, and they put the client in the house, and they bring a bunch of Naropa students who meditate and to spend time with them. And that was the great experiment. And so that's my first. I didn't even hear the word Windhorse or Maitri or anything. That was just, those Naropa people, the stuff they do. At that time that seemed just, this would have been the mid '80s. It's probably '86 or '87. And that's when Ed he did about 8 of these households. Like I said, you'd have the identified client, they'd put him in a house, or an apartment typically, or a house. And then we usually had 1 or 2, or they did, I wasn't here yet, I wasn't around yet. They had 1 or 2 housemates that would live there. And then we had people we called basic attenders. They would come in and spend, like, the classic thing is 3 hours. And Ed said 3 hours is just long enough to get together, get to know, kind of warm up to each other, have something happen, and then to be done and go home and take a nap. He thought it was kind of an organic human shape, like 3 hours with someone. And this was not psychotherapy. This is time together. And all these people were meditation practitioners, and let's see. Also, another early description I heard of how Windhorse works was, it goes back to this idea and experience. I think it's a very common experience, is states of mind are contagious, right? States of mind and feeling are contagious. They're like this stuff that flows between us. And somebody was trying to explain Windhorse to me back then, like, how does that work? And they said, you put people around them with the stable minds, or as stable as you can get, who are meditators, and they're working on, their intent is to stabilize their minds. And then you put them in a kind of deliberate relationship around somebody with an unstable mind, and there's kind of the instability moves out into the group of people, and then if you're working on raising your lungta, right? If you're doing your practice and you're staying present, then it helps you to maintain your stable mind in a kind of an unstable environment. Does that make sense? What I'm saying? It's and it flows both ways and all ways, and then maybe I'll get into this a little bit. Is teams kind of the team then kind of reflects, and we're talking yesterday about milieu therapy. It very much relates to that you were saying that not as much parallel process, or is that right? Was that the term? That there used to be much more discussion of parallel process of the staff, and we discussed that quite a lot, like how the team manifests the mind of the client, and the client really I should go into that a little bit. The client is not just the individual in front of you, really. The more I work, the more I realize they're just a representative of our family system and all the systems they inhabit. The idea that I am, and partly why I wanted to share some of my history and my people, is that the idea that I am this is kind of ridiculous. I am a kind of, I'm a collision of a whole bunch of things that kind of rise up and manifest as this Jack phenomenon. And it goes back to body, speech, mind. Let me look at this. We have this. I won't get into this, but there's a kind of our supervision style is based on this too, But let me just say briefly, like, so body of a. So just to speak of me, my body is like, it would include like my body structure and how I hold my body, my hair, my gait, my complexion, the way my clothes are, things I eat, my kind of general environments and my home environments. So part of me is, to know me, for you to know me, you'd know me a lot more if you came to my house. You'd know me a lot better if you knew what my car is like and the inside of it. And the physical environments that I inhabit are a huge part of who I am. If you've ever moved across the country, you really notice how destabilized your sense of self is and how much you derive sense of self from your physical environments. It's weird to be here this many days, I have to say, because I'm like out of my place, and like, so my physical environment, I'm aware of how much I derive who I am from the habit. It's these little things, and that's what the other day I was saying. In a way, Windhorse is like really gets into the common and the ordinary. We are so much our environment. So that's body, and then mind, or let me say speech, is then how they communicate. The energy qualities of speaking, so not necessarily the words, but the qualities and maybe the dialect or something, the degree of their precision, how they relate to their emotions, their patterns of relationship. Do they have concern for others? What's the nature of their connection to others? And then the feelings they evoke in the people around them. These are all elements of speech, and in this kind of dividing up the world, speech is considered, I think an easy way to look at it is the energy we exchange with each other is our speech. Our environment of speech is the people we're surrounded by, we're held by, the qualities of that. So you can see that gets very quickly into kind of family systems, and relational systems. And then mind, how people relate to their own mind, their degrees of obsession. What are they interested in? Are they able to see their own mind? Emotion, how much do they identify with the patterns of their thought patterns? Are they able to come out of daydreams? Can they notice gaps in thinking? Can they self-reflect on their own mind? What's their relation to states of mindfulness? What are their habits of altering mind? So substances or other activities that alter their mind. And then part of this also is people's daily schedule and and also how they see their future, how they see their life. Those are all kind of states of mind. So in Windhorse, when we think of a person, we are a very complex overlapping of these kind of three areas. And when somebody, so let me say, so when people come to us, of course, people don't just come to us for no reason. People come to Windhorse because they're in some highly disturbed state of mind. or highly disturbed state, maybe I should just say, of all of these things. Their total organism, whatever, is interrupted. And usually people, once in a while, but almost never do people come to us as a first break. Usually people have worked their way through the medical system and had things that work and don't work and work and don't work. But if they've come to us, usually a whole bunch of things have been going wrong for a whole long time. We typically have clients who have multiple overlapping disturbances, so it can certainly include states of mind and mood and substance use. But even when I say it that way, it sounds like it's inside of them. But what I have to say that it's remarkable how often people will come to me and I'll get to know them, and the team will get to know them, and over time you start to go, oh, of course, yeah, of course. And I can think of several where I was like, oh, the whole system and the predicaments of your life are so crazy, and you are so sane in the midst of that. That often it's like kind of reflecting the basic, that people have this basic sanity, and their response completely makes sense if you really investigate the environments that they come from, the way they are and inhabit their own physical world, and and what they do with their mind. Some people can get themselves down a rabbit hole with things they do with their own mind. We talk about mindfulness practices, right? Things that raise longta and bring somebody into focus. Well, then there are mindlessness practices that people use to switch out, and often they're the same things. I mean, I've had as many people switched out from doing meditation and contemplative practices that were not appropriate, as from doing drugs or getting into situations. There can be a very slight difference between mindfulness and mindlessness practices. So. There's a great term, and it relates back to longta, and the tradition coming from the. I'm sorry, I'm jumping all over, but I think it's kind of going in the same direction here. Raising longta, and going back to Ed and Trungpa came together, and this. I like to think of it as a great confluence of this great Western tradition with this great Eastern tradition, and they came together. And Tibetan Buddhism has a long history of its own psychology. Buddhism, as we all know, it's not technically a religion. I think it's quite often practiced pretty religiously, but it also just contains great, deep, wide knowledge of human mind that I think far exceeds anything I've encountered from our brief 100 or so years of psychotherapy and psychoanalysis. But I like to think that Ed and Trungpa recognized each other, and it's them coming together in this recognition brought this great confluence of these two traditions. So from the Tibetan side of things, there's a great term. It's the transmission of human sanity, which I just love. I love to think of that. So in my life, I'm just trying to gather it and like kind of collect my own sanity and my own kind of longta and balance with the world and my own path. Frank and I were talking about path more, and finding my own path and my kind of synchronization. So often we talk, the body, mind, speech. I'll get into this am I doing on time?
Terrible, actually.
Am
You're
I?
way over.
Oh, shit. Where are we?
We're at 37 minutes.
Okay. So I have a little more time.
Well, you've got a lot of time. You wanted me to let you know when you were at 5:30, which I didn't do because you were doing so well. So we're over your self-imposed limit.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Give me another bump in, like you did so well last time, in about 15 minutes. Okay. So let's see. I want to go back to kind of body, mind, speech. One way in Windhorse, one way we look at disturbances or human sanity, and this all relates to, all this comes together, like Lungta or raising Lungta, is it's the synchronization of when your body and your mind and your speech, as I defined there, when those are synchronized and together, you're probably doing pretty well. Things are lining up. Energy is supporting energy. People around you, I mean, a huge part of this, and it's come up over and over, is the people we surround ourselves with. Like, we are so much a reflection of the environments of people around us. So in Windhorse, there's a great attention to an interest in synchronization of these three levels: body, mind, and speech, or speech and mind. And often when people come to us, there's a profound disconnect between those three in their life. They've become dislodged for all kinds of personal reasons. And this is where diagnoses are pretty weak, I think, because they just don't describe all the oh my gosh, the human conditions are just so nuanced. So the disturbances in these kind of three particular fields come together in really surprising ways in different people in different systems. So, let's see. So I want to say more about the Windhorse team. So a team, Windhorse is often called environmental therapy because it's bringing these three environments. These are environments we all inhabit, the environment of our mind, of our relational patterns, and of our physical. And so Windhorse team, and I hope this is some help to the Gnosis people. You guys are working with Gnosis, is because it relates to me about, this is our version of environmental therapy, and you're doing environmental therapy. And so in Windhorse, like I said, we set up a house. The classic thing was we have a housemaid who comes in, and that's a paid position. Often it's a grad student at Naropa or somebody who has some practice. Generally it's somebody with some relationship to a contemplative practice. We look for people who are stable, ordinary people who are kind of so just stable, ordinary, grounded people who have something else going on besides the house. Like, in a way, it's not, I warn off housemates from just being committed to the house, that you gotta have something else going on. One of our current guys who I think is really sturdy as a housemaid, and I think he's on his second or third gig as a housemaid, and he's a mason. He works part-time as a mason, and bricks and walls and making fireplaces, and just that like earth and stone work is a amazing counterpoint to doing this more kind of ephemeral states of mind that a Windhorse team kind of travels in. So then we have a housemate, lives with the client. Their job is to just live an ordinary life, grounded, ordinary, rhythmic life. Really discourage them having long, meaningful psychological conversations, which is a problem when you have a Naropa student who's studying to be, a psychotherapist, and sometimes you just have to haul them out of there because they want to go in there and just like they're here because it means so much to them. They bring their heart and soul, and it's really bad. It just distorts the whole situation, and they end up, usually it's like a double drowning. They go into the surf, and then they get into their own extreme states of mind, and they lose their ground. It's so important, like the ordinary.
Do you avoid those types of?
Well, you never know what people are going to manifest as when they get into a house. They're going to be what they are. But what we do is we build a team around it to support. If you just put a housemate in there alone, that's cruel. It's with someone in a really extreme state of mind, there's a term we use is radical exchange. So, which would be like, exchange is a term we use a lot, which is it's not the same, but it's kind of a close cousin to transference and countertransference. It's in that kind of realm. And so people get flooded if they're in too much relationship for too long without other things. And then around that we bring in what we call basic attenders. And basic attendance is meditation in relationship and in motion. It's and really in Windhorse we call one position the basic attendance position, but it is it's a practice of presence and mindfulness right now. That's probably what the unifying principle of contemplative practice is. It's right here. It's right now. It's not a concept. It's not in an hour from now. It's not last week. It's very much an interest in, you have feelings in your body right here, right? You don't have feelings in your body tomorrow or feelings in your body yesterday. If you have them, it's now. It's immediate. It's felt. So that's I think the place where the contemplative meets relationship and psychotherapy and basic attendance. And so we use that term basic attendance in this one position, but the truth is every layer in the organization is considered an aspect of basic attendance. And I won't go into that. But so the team, we have the housemates around, the housemate, basic attenders that, it can be.
Just curious, is it all different diagnoses, or did it just include haplocytosis?
All kinds of things, all kinds of states. Often psychosis plus, you could have somebody, and that manifests in different ways. So it definitely, it's not, it started out as just like full-on psychosis with no, it tried to have people who didn't have substance abuse going on. But now we work with all kinds of people in all kinds of states of mind. So definitely people dealing with psychosis, fixed delusions, profound depression.
How many people diagnosed borderline?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, borderline, eating disorder people, self-harming, like suicidality. We don't work with people with a history of serious violence, some violence, but it's just we just don't do that. That's it just raises the bar too much. So does that make sense? So
Yeah, could we, seeing we've already started with some questions,
Sure.
do you think we should
Yeah.
move to a discussion? I'll take a privileged position and
Sure, great.
ask you. So your basic attenders, you select them for stability and ordinariness, maybe a meditative practice. Do you initiate them through any kind of training? How does that go? And how do time do you do that?
There's within Windhorse, we have a number of kinds of groups going on in the organization. And so new basic attenders, actually all basic attenders are in an ongoing supervision group. And every team, within every given team, so right now we have, I think there's around, it changes, but there's 70 to 80 teams in Boulder, and there's usually it's about as many staff, so there's about 70 to 80 staff in the organization. And a team could be anything from, because the teams have a life cycle to them too. So somehow when I describe it, I'm describing the most full-blown, immediate manifestation, but teams, as they go on in time, they shrink, they get smaller. People start to get busy in the community, and the team goes away. But when a team is new and big, and we'll have what we call a weekly team meeting, and then we also have a supervision meeting. Often those alternate. So one week the client will come if they're willing to. Often it takes a period of months before a client can tolerate a group of people. That's quite a lot. It can take months, or even like I've had teams where the client couldn't stand to come for over a year,
One team per patient?
Per patient, yeah.
Not per house, per patient.
Well, per house,
Per
yeah.
house.
It'll be
And how many patients in total?
a one.
Oh.
But and this is where it's different from Kingsley Hall and Gnosis houses. We'll have one person at the middle in a team of people around them. And this is a big problem with Windhorse. Is you can guess it, that's expensive, and that's a problem. I have a number of what we call like natural teams where I'm supervising, or is that the right word, consulting to a situation that is a natural team where there's often it's members of a family, sometimes it's friends or extended family that are brought in, and that's a much more affordable thing, and I'm just trying to help them set up there's kind of like we often use this term mandala, like a formation of energy. There's kind of a human mandala of a holding pattern that you build and establish, and there's all kinds of tricky tweaks to it, and no mandala is the same. But I'll come in and help on like a natural team, and that can be much less expensive. And maybe there's a therapist that is already connected to the client or something like that.
Steve?
Actually, two questions. One is, are all the wind courses that like in Portland and San Luis Obispo, are they set up the same way?
No. We have so Ed was the founding person, and it started in Boulder, and his book initially was published, The Seduction of Madness, and that was republished as Recovering Sanity. And for years it was only in Boulder, and then Jeff Fortuna, close associate of Ed's, moved to Northampton, Massachusetts, and started a Windhorse there. And over time, there have been little Windhorses that have popped up. So then the San Luis Obispo and the Portland, Oregon one are actually being, what's the right word, sponsored by or supported by the Northampton Windhorse. There's various cross-pollination among us. There's a number of them over in Europe. There's one in Vienna. I don't have all the locations off the top of my head, but there's a number of places in Europe where they're doing it. It is a model, but it's not a franchise.
They've adopted the name, like Soteria places have adopted that name?
Yep, they'll use the term Windhorse. Yeah. But there's no...
It's not like your old
Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
McWindhorse. We haven't done that yet. So it's very local and
But they run pretty much similar to how you.
similar. You have similar underlying principles, but like anything, there are local conditions. So, like just taking a page from my experience with homeless and homeless shelters and homeless things, you can have a good idea, but homeless, services, they're local. They're specific to that place. If you try to just drop a model on different cities and different populations, it doesn't really work.
Dina had another question.
Yeah, one other part is how do you work with people that want to come off of medications?
Let's see. Often, a lot of our referrals come from, they come from all over, but a lot of them will come from like hospitals like Menninger or Sierra Tucson or Austin Riggs, places like this, it's really common that people come on just a snoot of medication, just so much medication, and some of them it's like, oh, you came from that place. I won't say that you come from that place. It's like, well, yeah, that's what they do. They medicate people heavily, some of them. And commonly when people come to Windhorse, I like to say, like one of my mottos is share the problem. Like, don't try to solve it for people. Like some people, they don't want you to touch their medication, but like they leave it alone. This is what keeps me good. Other people don't want anything to do with it. So my view is to work with people. Like, well, what do you want to do? How would that work? I'd recommend you don't just cold turkey it. Like, how do you slowly dial it down and integrate it? But we definitely work with people who go down on medication. I work with people on no medication who sometimes I think suffer greatly because because they won't tolerate any medication. And so we have psychiatrists who we work with and kind of I feel like it's important to what works. So I hate to see people suffering through just endlessly with their minds. So often it's like helping them dial it down and to have as little as possible or none if they want to do that. But I see it as kind of a support. So.